Hey everyone, this is Jono. I hope you're all safe and well. Thank you for joining me for another one of my videos. Today I'm going to be talking about the Discourse forum platform and what I think is one of the most powerful features in it, trust levels. I'm going to be talking about what are trust levels, how do they work, why are they interesting, and how do we use them. Let's get to it. Alrighty, thanks for joining me. As usual, if you want to stay up to date with tips, tricks, and recommendations for building amazing communities, both inside and outside of businesses, hit that subscribe button and hit that knobbly notification button too. So today we're talking about Discourse trust levels. Now, there are approximately 1 billion forum platforms out there. I've counted them, trust me. But I've become a real fan of Discourse, and one of the major reasons is this feature called trust levels. Now, in this video, I'm going to go through how trust levels work. I'm going to walk through all the different features of them, and I'm going to go to a live forum and show where they live in Discourse and how you can configure them, all of that kind of good stuff in front of a computer. But before I get to that, I just want to provide a bit of a high-level overview of what trust levels are and why I think they're really, really, really important, okay? Now, when anybody joins any kind of community, they fundamentally go through 3 different phases. I talk about this in my book called People Powered. The first phase is called casual. This is where they join the community, they're brand new, they don't really know anyone, they've got a whole load of imposter syndrome, they don't want to make an idiot of themselves, they're not really sure where to go, what to click on, and how to get started. And it usually takes a couple of months for people to kind of spin up and get comfortable in joining the community. And that 2-month period is important because that's about how long it takes to build a habit. So if you want to quit drinking as much, if you want to eat healthier, exercise more, build any kind of new habit, if you do it for about 2 months consistently, then it kind of rewires your brain a little bit and it becomes just second nature to you. Trust me, I did this. When I first moved to the US, I hated any kind of exercise, and my wife, who's an exercise nut, got me into the habit, and now I exercise most weeks. So we want to do that for our new communities, and that's the casual phase. Now, when people go beyond that couple of months, they then become regulars. They're showing up every day or most days. They're pretty dependable members of your community. They're active, they're interested, and that's a great period of time to kind of unlock their curiosity, get them excited about new projects, new initiatives, creating content, organizing events, all of this kind of stuff. And then a very small number of people will become what I call core members. These are incredibly engaged, super passionate people about your community. They don't just care about their own community experience, they care about the overall experience for everybody, okay? Now, one of the tricky things with all communities is tracking that progression, okay? And this is what Discourse trust levels are all about. So there's basically a series of different levels. There's trust level 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? And again, I'm going to go through each of these in detail to give you a deep overview of this. But the basic gist is that when you sign up to a new Discourse forum, you're at trust level 0. It's a bit like someone coming to your front door and knocking on it, right? And you're sat inside and you're thinking, I have no idea who this person is. Do I trust them? Do I welcome them into my home? And it's the same thing with the community. When somebody joins up to your forum, we don't know if they're a spammer or are a troll or they've got negative intentions, or they may be a really good person with great intentions, okay? So trust level 0 is their unknown. Now, when they've joined the community for a little while, they get into trust level 1. It's usually about 15 to 20 minutes of kind of casual participation, and we'll get to the details later on. And then when they participate much more comprehensively, they get into trust level 2, okay? And it's the same thing, a lot more comprehensive participation, they get into trust level 3. Now, trust level 4 is a bit different. You have to manually add people in there, okay? So remember how I talked about casual members, regular members, and core members? Well, your core members are typically the people you handpick because you know them and they're doing amazing work across the community, inside and outside of Discourse. Those are the people you would handpick and put into trust level 4. Now, what's neat about trust levels is they're automated, okay? There's a set of criteria, which is what I'm going to go through in a second, that when people meet that criteria, they go up these levels automatically. So what's amazing about this is that when you set up a new community and people go there and they start participating and hanging out, you can go into your community at any time and see that approximate breakdown. Who's in trust level 0, 1, 2, 3, and then of course the manual people that you add into trust level 4. So unlike a lot of other forum platforms where you've got to do some CSI-like research to go and figure out like who are your most active members and what are they doing and all the rest of it, Discourse basically gives you that information right out of the box. It's awesome. And what I love about these trust levels, and again, I'll get to this in a second when we get to the computer, is it's not just posting. In the old crappy days of forums, it'd be like, okay, if you post 100 messages, you get a new level or a new badge, or if you post 250 messages, you get a new level or a badge. So you get a load of people replying with like one-word responses like, okay, sounds good, yeah, just so they could get that level up. They game the system. Well, the trust levels in Discourse are not like that. It's a combination of reading, writing, getting things liked, liking things, all that kind of good stuff, okay? Now, so that's really neat. It gives you a clearer understanding of the active members of your community. However, it doesn't just stop there. What's awesome about this is the way the Jeff Atwood and the team have designed Discourse is that it bakes in moderation, right? So one of the big challenges with communities is having enough moderators to deal with trolls and spam and things like that. So when you enter a new community at trust level 0, a lot of the capabilities in Discourse are actually disabled for you because you may be a spammer. And then what happens is when you go to trust level 1, some of those capabilities are opened back up again. And then when you go to trust level 2, more capabilities are opened up. And as you go up these trust levels, the ability to moderate your community opens up. So that means that regular community members, people who are not part of your community team or, you know, in the inner circle of your community, their moderation capabilities, such as being able to flag content as offensive, being able to review those flags, or even being able to move topics or rename topics, those capabilities open up to regular users. Now, don't worry. I know some of you are freaking out thinking, I don't want some regular, random in my community automatically doing that stuff. You can tweak this, right? But 9 times out of 10, when I'm working with companies to help them set up communities, we don't change it. The default behavior works really well in Discourse, okay? So this is a really powerful way of scaling up that moderation burden. It's awesome, okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna head over there to my computer and let's go and get into some of the details. All right, so when I'm talking to people about trust levels, I often point them towards this blog post that's visible right now. And the reason for this is this blog post goes into a lot of detail of what these trust levels enable you to do and what you can't do, and also how you earn them. So I'm going to put the link to this blog post in the show notes. But I don't really want to go through and read this word for word because that's going to be boring. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go through and review the bullet points where I think we can illustrate the power of how this works. Okay, so I'm going to go down to trust level 0. Now this, remember, this is a little bit like somebody showing up at your front door, right, and knocking on it. Let's say it's at 10 o'clock at night. You don't know whether you can trust them. Somebody's just signed up for your Discourse forum and you don't know if you can trust them. They may be a spammer. They may be a good person. What do we know? So importantly, these bullet points here are outlining what are the things that this person cannot do. So for example, they can't send personal messages to other users, right? And this is designed to prevent people being spammed, people being sent hateful content. But think about it in the real world. Like if you don't know anyone, if you don't know a group of people, you wouldn't go up and just randomly whisper in people's ears. That's just weird, okay? If you do think that's normal, you're weird. Don't do that, okay? So it's got a logical connection to building the social norms of any kind of group of people. You can't reply as a new topic. This disallows the ability for people to, branch conversations into like multiple different conversations and basically bombard a whole series of different discussions into the community. You can't flag posts. Now remember, you're kind of unknown when you're at trust level 0. And flagging is where you say this particular post is deemed inappropriate or offensive. Let's say there's pornography in that post. And when you flag it, it notifies the moderators of the community so they can go and review it, make a decision about it, whether they delete it, whether they warn the user, whether they leave it, whatever it might be. I'm not going to go through all of this, but what's also important, I think, to highlight here, for example, is not posting more than 2 hyperlinks. And again, this is about spam prevention. Often spammers will just blast a whole load of links into a forum post or into a Facebook message or something along those lines. It's a clear method that spammers use, and this reduces that. So if people are generally wanting to post more than 2 links, they're probably going to be up to no good, okay? And these, just to be very clear, these restrictions in trust level 0 are very, very temporary. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to kind of get from trust level 0 to 1, which I'll get to in a second. But what's important about this as well is nearer the bottom here, right, is that these bullets are about kind of setting the cultural norms of a community. Like if you go into a brand new community and you start adding tons and tons of different topics and discussions, it can be a bit overwhelming for people. So they limit this to 3 topics, which I think makes a lot of sense. If people want to add more than 3 topics, then, the quality of the discussion is probably going to actually go down, okay? Similarly, posting more than 10 replies in a short period of time. So these are really good defaults. Again, you can go and configure all of this stuff if you want to and change it, But 9 times out of 10, I leave the defaults as they are with Discourse. I think they've been very, very thoughtful in how they do this. Now, to get to trust level 1, and this is where, again, it gets really interesting, you can see here, these are the requirements, okay? So to get to trust level 1, somebody who's at trust level 0, they've just signed up, they need to enter into at least 5 different topics, right? Go in there and read them. They need to read at least 30 posts in those 5 different topics. And they can go into more topics, they can go into 10 or 15. And they need to spend a total of 10 minutes reading posts. Now, what I love about this is that Discourse is focused on rewarding reading. And reading is so important to understanding anything. We've got into a culture in recent years of just gassing, just, talking, waffling, bickering, arguing, just so much like blur. And we haven't focused enough on the importance of reading and understanding and condensing information and understanding it so you can have a reasonable discussion, you can have a reasonable point of view. So that's how people get to trust level 1. So this is really cleverly designed because, a lot of people when they join forums, they just go in there and they start doing this, but they don't take enough time to soak up the culture and the norms of the forum. And that's one of the things that Discourse does by definition. It automatically provides the ability to kind of bucket people into those different levels, okay? Now, what happens is when they meet that criteria, they've entered at least 5 topics, they've read at least 30 posts, they've spent a total of 10 minutes reading posts. This then unlocks a series of different new features for them. So they can now use all the core Discourse functions, right? All of those new user restrictions are removed. So everything that we talked about kind of up here, all of that gets removed, okay? They can now post more than one image. They can now post attachments. They can flag posts. They can have more links in a post. They can post more than 3 topics. All of this stuff gets restricted, gets removed, so they become normal community members, okay? What they can also do is they can send personal messages to people, which is great because this is when you start building relationships with other members on the community. The thing that I think a lot of people forget about when building communities is it's not just about the group dynamic in the public space. It's about the one-on-one relationships that are fostered between different members of your community as well. They can upload images and attachments, as I just mentioned. They can also edit wiki posts. Now, a wiki post in Discourse is where you post something and there's a button in there where you can say that this can be edited by other people. I think it's kind of a cool feature. I don't tend to use it very often, if I'm being honest with you. I know people have used it, for example, for collaborating on things like release notes and documentation and things like that. But now it enables people to go and edit those if they're there. Flagging posts can be enabled. And what they can do is they can mute other users, okay? Now, what this means is that they can, this one here, is that if there is a user that's kind of annoying them, they're kind of frustrating to them, they can mute it so they don't see the material. So now, this is where we get really interesting. So at this point, right, trust level 0, you generally have a load of people in trust level 0, and I'll talk about the numbers a little bit later on. You then have people start getting into trust level 1, but when you get to trust level 2, this to me is when we really start zoning in on what I consider to be like the core of those regular users. Remember how we talked about casual, regular, and core? This is when we're starting to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit, okay? So to get to trust level 2, it requires a much more comprehensive set of requirements. So first of all, they need to visit at least 15 days to the community. So they need to spend at least 2 weeks going there. Now that can be, again, this is not sequentially, right? They can show up for those 15 days in 6 months if they want to. That's totally fine. But they need to show up for at least 15 days. They need to like at least one thing, and they need to have received at least one like. Now, I actually, the one area where sometimes I will tweak some of this with the rollout of forums, sometimes we change this criteria a little bit to receive more likes. So they're contributing content that, is getting well recognized by other members. Because one thing at the beginning of a community typically is you get loads of likes, right? People are very supportive of each other, especially if you're running early adopter initiative, which I'm going to put a video out about. They reply to at least 3 different topics, and they enter at least 20 topics and read at least 100 posts. And they spend a total of an hour reading posts. So this kind of gets people to, again, kind of like a good early stage of like regular participation. You can see the difference here. Trust level 1, this is all about reading, right? And just consuming. And this now is about about interaction. It's about writing and reading and liking and all of those different pieces. But the emphasis really is on reading and participation and just kind of building up your participation flow as a new community member. So now what happens is a new set of features get unlocked for them, right? They can use the invite others to this topic button for one-click onboarding of new users to participate in topics. So this is great. Like, let's say you're having a really interesting conversation about, I don't know, let's say a water bottle, right? In a water bottle community. I'm sure that exists. And people are talking about, hey, cool, we've got this GitHub satellite water bottle. It's really neat. It's got this cool cap on the top, blah, 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 blah. And you want to bring somebody who you know, like maybe a colleague or a family member or a friend, into this. What you can do is you can then go and invite them directly. You can also invite outside users to private messages by making a group private message. And this is really neat for having these kind of group conversations. You also can like more things. So there is a limitation on the number of likes that you can apply. And that's, as you can see, that's increased here. You can ignore other users and you can edit your own post for up to 30 days after posting. So this is a really nice way of going and modifying content as you see fit, right? So, you know, again, this is a good level to get to. What I often do when I'm starting communities is when people hit Trust Level 2, I'll often like celebrate the fact that they've hit that level. So to give you an example, I'm going to go to Guitar Hacks, which is a community I've been helping my buddy Giorgio get up and running. And then if we click here, we call in Guitar Hacks Trust Level 2, we've named it Shredders, and I'll get to that in a second. And these were the first 3 people that hit Trust Level 2, and we gave them a badge, and we just recognized it, and people liked it, and people went in here and said, this is the coolest project I've been part of. This is the kind of thing that you want, right? This is a great way of recognizing people. You don't have to send them swag, you don't have to do anything particularly special. It's just a great way of doing that. Now let's get to Trust Level 3. Now, the thing about Trust Level 3 is, this is when these people are definitely regulars and they're kind of edging into the core level. These are very, very active members of your community. So to get there, in the last 100 days, they need to have visited at least half of that time, okay? So this is, you know, this may be in the second 100 days that they've joined the community, or the third 100 days, but they need to have shown up at least 50% of the time. That is a big ask for a community. This by definition is making sure that they are considered to be a regular. Now, they must have replied to at least 10 different non-PM topics. So this is where they're contributing across the board. Because it's one thing to show up to a community 50% of the days, but if you're not doing anything, you're just reading, then you're not an active participant. That's valuable, but you're not really an active participant. Of the topics created in the last 100 days, they must have viewed at least 25%, right? And that's capped at 500. So again, this is all about a comprehensive view of the content and the material and discussions that are going on. And of the posts created in the last 100 days, they must have read 25% of them. So this is basically assuming that these people are showing up regularly, they're reading a lot of content, they're consuming a lot of content, they're replying to some of that content. They must have received 20 likes and given 30 likes, okay? And again, this is all about a diverse range of participation. It's not just reading, it's not just writing. They must not have received more than 5 spam or offensive flags, which is pretty common, that usually most people who hit Trust Level 3 don't receive those because they're usually decent people. And obviously they must not have been suspended or silenced, okay? Now, when people get into Trust Level 3, this is when we start getting into the increased level of moderation, okay? And these new features open up. So first of all, they can recategorize and rename these topics, okay? So this is super powerful. Imagine someone in Trust Level 0 goes and adds a topic and they put it into the wrong category. This is very, very common. Now, in most other forums, you'd have your small moderation team, which might be one person or a couple of people, and they'd be the people who'd have the admin privileges to be able to go in there and put it into the right topic. Or someone would have to ask the original user to say, could you go and move it into the right topic so they could edit their own topic? And frankly, most people are not going to respond to that if they're brand new. But with this, when you start having people in Trust Level 3, now those people can just go in there and do that, okay? These are regular users. They've not been asked to be moderators. This is just a capability that's opened up to them. The other thing that they can do is they can access a secure category that's only visible to users at Trust Level 3 or higher. So if I go into Guitar Hacks, I think it's this one, it's lounge. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't tend to use this very much. I'm not really a big fan of having private discussions with people who've reached a certain level like this. But I do know some communities that have found this useful, primarily for discussing moderator kind of type topics and things like that. But it's there as a feature if you want to have it, okay? They can have all of their links followed. So they can get that if they've had all their links followed. Again, that's kind of making sure that they're posting material that's relevant and interesting to the audience. And you'll actually see like a little number next to links in Discourse to see whether people have clicked on them. So for example, if I go to news and announcements, I think it's this one. You can see a link here and there's a little number 5 there that shows how many people have clicked on it, okay? Trust level 3 spam flags cast are, sorry, they can have, I'm mixing things up. They can have their links followed. Trust level 3 spam flags cast on trust level 0. User post immediately hide that post. So you can read through the other ones here. These are like more moderation capabilities. The flags cast on a trust level 0 post insufficient diversity will auto silence the user and hide all of their posts. So this is where we're enabling trust level 3 people to play an active moderation role in how they're actually actively using the forum in a moderator sense. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight is that when people get into trust level 3, they won't typically know that these capabilities have opened up. One of the things that I think the Discourse team could do a slightly better job of is when people hit these new trust levels, that there's much more clarity in how they can use these new features at any one of these, okay? So one of the things I'd recommend, especially for trust level 3, is that when people get into that level, you reach out and have like a one-on-one conversation with them and walk them through the features, give them a sense of how they work, give them a sense of how you like to do moderation in the community, what kind of things they should be looking out for, okay? They can also make their own post wiki that's going to be edited by any trust level 1 plus users. So this again is a great place for creating collaborative content, and then the limit has been increased. So those 4 levels, right? Trust level 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are all automated, okay? This is, so that means that you don't have to do anything particularly special, and you'll be able to go into your community and to be able to get a sense of who is at which level and what can they do and what did they do to earn it. And remember, those 4 levels are a great way of bucketing your community down into certain levels and then being able to engage with them in different ways. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, trust level 4 is a little different because, like I mentioned, these people need to be manually added, okay? So this is where somebody has been doing an amazing job in your community and you manually add them into trust level 4. The reason why this is manual, I think for most communities, is because typically it's not just going to be participation in Discourse, it's going to be things outside of the community that they may be doing. They may be organizing events, creating content, writing software, translating things, whatever it might be. So they get manually added in here. Now, when they get into trust level 4, this is when a serious set of administrative and moderator capabilities kind of open up, okay? So at trust level 4, they can edit any post that's been posted in the platform. They can pin and unpin topics. They can close topics, archive topics. They can make topics unlisted. That's where a topic that somebody adds isn't seen, like when you go into, let's say, in here, you see all of these topics listed. An unlisted topic means that it doesn't appear in the latest view or the categories view. They can split and merge topics. They can reset the topic bump date. Their likes are increased. And then the flag that's cast on a post immediately takes effect and hides that target post, okay? So essentially, these people are the all-powerful trust level 4 folks, okay? So that's basically the breakdown. Again, I'd recommend you go and take a look at this and get a sense of how this works. Now, when you set up your community, let me go into the admin here and let me go to settings and let me go to trust levels. Now, when you come in here, this is where you can go and configure all of this stuff, okay? So there's basically the list of capabilities is here on the left. And then what you can do is you can go through and configure them. Now, I'm not going to go through these one by one because it will be the world's longest, most boring video ever. So I will leave that as an exercise for the good viewer to go and take a look at that. But what I do want to show you is that in your community, so let's go to the Discourse community as an example. If I click on the burger menu and then click on badges, when you go down to There's a lot on here in this community. You can see these badges. These are the different trust levels, right? So basic is trust level 0, and it's called basic internally. Member is trust level 1. Regular, I believe it's trust level 1. I'll need to go and double check this. I always mix these up. Regular is trust level 2, or maybe I'm going to go and double check these. Okay, hang on. You see, Jono, you should have done your research on this. So here's the breakdown. Okay, so new user is trust level 0. Okay, so let's go back to this. So new user is not listed there. Basic user, that's right. So trust level 1 is this one. Okay, trust level 2 is called member. Okay, which is this badge here. Trust level 3 is called regular, and then trust level 4 is called leader. Okay, that's the basic breakdown. Now, you can go and see these here. What I always recommend with a lot of communities is that you actually rebrand these. So for example, if we go back to Guitar Hacks, and then I go to badges, you can see down here, we've got these trust levels. And you see how these have been renamed with a guitar theme: Shredder, Strummer, Rockstar, Guitar God. Now, this is a very small community. It's only been out for about a month, okay? So it hasn't even been publicly announced yet. So there's not a lot of people in here. But that gives you a bit of a sense of how that works. Now, if you want to go and do that for your community, I'd recommend you do this for 2 reasons. One is that my worry about calling it trust level on the website itself, right, is that people may then do a search on trust levels, find this video, read the requirements in this blog post, for example, and then go and game the system. Just try and meet this criteria and this criteria so they can go up those levels. So my personal recommendation is that you actually rebrand from trust levels to something like community groups or community level, and you also rebrand the name of these badges. Now you're probably thinking that's going to be complicated. It's going to require some complicated code to do that. Luckily, not so. So what you do is you go to the admin, and then what you're going to do is click on settings. Customize. And then if you go to text, now this is a really neat interface. I'm actually going to do a separate video on this where you can search for any text that's in Discourse and you can change it. So for example, remember if we go back to the badges here, okay, these are the different trust levels and these are the names. So basic is trust level 1, okay? So if we do a search for basic, okay, and you can see here that there is badges.basic_user.name is Strummer. And what we can do is we can click edit and we can change that. So this has already been changed to Strummer, obviously. So if we now want to do a search for the next trust level, which is member, again, you can see here in Guitar Hacks, we've already got Shredder listed and that's been edited. And what's neat here is that it's literally everywhere in the platform. So if I do a search for trust levels, you can see that, for example, this is going to be the words trust levels within the admin site. So it's not just the text for things that are publicly visible in Discourse, it's also the things that are internal. And there's a lot of like paragraphs. So for example, this one here, for a few quick tips on getting started as a new user, check out this blog post. That takes you to the new user tips and tricks. As you participate here, we'll get to know you and temporary news limitations will be lifted. So you can go and modify this as well. One quick note on this is that you can actually go and modify almost anything within Discourse itself. For example, if you want to change your emails, you can select which email template in here, and then you can go and modify the text in here. So that's a really powerful feature. So one of the things I would definitely recommend you do is that when you're setting up these trust levels here, is think about what happens when people hit different trust levels, right? So when somebody is brand new at trust level 0, you don't do anything. But when they hit trust level 1, what do you want to do for them? Do you want to maybe send them a welcome email? Do you want to congratulate them in some way when they hit trust level 2? Do you want to do what we did in Guitar Hacks, for example, where we went and did, remember how I showed this earlier on, where we just recognize them up here? This is something I definitely recommend. When people hit trust level 3, I often recommend that we send swag or a challenge coin or a trophy or something, because that's kind of a big accomplishment, right? And when people get in trust level 4, you really want to pull out all of the stops, okay? So think about the things that you can do to make the experience as reactive as possible. Like they get to a particular trust level, and then you can respond to that. Now, how do you go and find who's hit which trust level? It's very simple. What you do is you go into the admin, you can scroll down here, and you can see here it says users per trust level, okay? And then what we can do is we can click on one of these, and they'll pop up. Now, I'm not going to click on these because this is going to expose people's email addresses that are on Guitar Hacks, and that would be really inappropriate to do. But you can see that we also see a broad breakdown of people who are in these different levels. Now, one of the things you're going to find is you're going to have a ton of people in trust level 0, fewer people, a lot of people in trust level 1, a much reduced number of people in trust level 2, and then a smaller fragment of people in trust level 3, and then a tiny fragment of people in trust level 4, okay? That's very, very normal. Now, you may be wondering why we've got 37 in trust level 0 and 47 in trust level 1 for this community. Well, the reason for that is that when you kick off a brand new Discourse community, everybody starts out, the first 50 users start out at trust level 1. That's so you can get people up and running, because usually the people you bring into a new community, you kind of know, they're friends, they're colleagues, they're staff members. They're probably not going to be, spamming you and posting loads of inappropriate content. So they're automatically given trust level 1. And then what happens is they then kind of go to, once you've got beyond 50 people, you then drop down to a brand new user goes to trust level 0, okay? So that's the reason why, because this community is very, very new, it hasn't been around for very long, it gives you a bit of a sense of, this is so new that's the reason why there's a very similar number of people in trust levels trust levels 0 and 1, okay? So that's how that works. Now, one thing I did mean to mention, which I didn't cover earlier, is that another note that you should have, that you should be aware of, is that with trust level 0, with trust level 3, this is the only one of these trust levels where you can lose it. Okay, so when someone goes up to trust level 3, if they don't continue to maintain this criteria here, they can actually drop back down to trust level 2. Now, this does happen from time to time, but I wouldn't worry about this too much. Generally, I tend to want the most notable interaction with a community member to be when they hit a new trust level, because they've done something new and notable and really, it's a really encouraging behavior. But that's just something you're going to want to be aware of, okay? So there we are. There we have it. That's trust levels in Discourse. They're an awesome feature. I use them with almost every community I ever work with when I'm using Discourse. They're a really, really powerful feature, not just because of the moderation capabilities that we walked through, but most importantly, being able to see where people are on their community journey. So don't just feel restricted to what the capabilities of Discourse are. Again, think creatively. What happens when people get to trust level 2? How can we make them feel special? How can we recognize them and reward them? When they get into trust level 3, they're clearly very interested in your community. Can we kick off new initiatives? Can we invite them to create new content? Can we invite them to participate in webinars and training sessions and demos and all kinds of stuff? When people get into trust level 4, how do you bring them into your community planning meetings? How do you make them part of the team so they can feel like they can change and influence the community in different ways? It's a great lens to look at your community and the different levels of maturity as people are going through it. So I hope that was useful. As usual, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you on the other side.